Good morning and welcome to the big story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. This morning we're looking at what many people are calling a major shift in the way Nigeria measures its economy. Nigeria's GDP has been rebased, and that simply means that the country has updated the way it calculates the size and shape of its economy using more recent data and reflecting new industries. But beyond the headlines and bigger numbers, what does this mean for everyday Nigerians? Is this real progress or just a new way of presenting the same old story? Well, joining us this morning is Dr. Samson Ark, is an economist and the CEO of Ark Economics and Data Limited. He's here to help us break it all down for our viewers today. Dr. Ark, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, it's good to have you. Let's go into the conversation today. We now have a bigger GDP on paper, but in real terms, does this actually tell us what the economy is doing better, or are we just seeing it clearly now?
Of course, it is the latter. We have a clearer picture of our economy, particularly the structure of the economy, the composition when it comes to different sectors of the economy. And we have a clearer picture. And the most important thing for data is that it guides decision making. And when you have the wrong data, you might just be grouping, and your decision is not really anchored in data since the data is false. But with a truer data now, with a better data, with improved data, with a clearer picture, one is better able to make decision that is strongly anchored in correct data. So it's going to benefit Nigerians because you will be better able to make decisions now, being guided with the right stuff instead of assuming something to be right when in actual sense it is not.
And then when we look at the updated figures, are there sectors that now seem more active or more important than before? And why would you say that matters, if there are any sectors as such?
Of course, one of the reasons for the basing is to bring in maybe sectors that were undercounted before now. Maybe their importance was not that big before now, but it's becoming bigger now. For example, the digital economy. We know the importance of digital economy. In 2010, the last reference year, is not the same with 2019. So it has become more important. And when the digital economy when a particular sector of an economy is more important, it means that it should be given probably a bigger seat at the table. And it should be given the importance it deserves. And when you give it importance, it redounds to the benefit of the economy in terms of growth, in terms of job creation, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of sustainability. And also for oil, for example, on the other side, on the flip side, for oil, the base data is showing that oil is not as important as we thought it was. Before the thinking was it was almost 10%, though the numbers normally vary, but normally approaching 10. But with the new data, it's showing that oil is becoming less and less important, and it's showing our economy is more diversified than we have ever thought. So it gives us a clearer picture, and when a particular sector is becoming more important, that means we should pay closer attention to it. And then when a sector is becoming less important, that means it's not going to affect us as much as before. I know for oil, it's not in terms of GDP. It's in terms of revenue generation and in terms of foreign exchange earnings. So that importance for oil still remains in terms of those two factors, or two metrics. In terms of GDP, for long, even at less than 10%, even at 10% is not really as important as we have over the years people have taken it to be.
And speaking of real change here, is this new data, is this really showing real change in the structure of the economy, or mostly a reflection of what has always been happening?
Of course, there are changes. Oil used to be the third biggest, according to the 2010 reference year. after crop and trade, the next used to be oil. Oil is down the priority list now. Real estate has taken over. And even after real estate, you're talking about telecoms as a fourth. So oil is down the priority list. And even in terms of size, if you look at the 2010 reference year, telecoms used to be bigger than it is now. So there are a lot of changes. Even for crop production, that is number one. It's still number one, by the way, but it's not as big as it was. If you look at the 2010 reference year, it was almost 1/5 of our GDP. Now it's slightly less than 1/5. So it's showing changes. The economy keeps evolving. In fact, some countries, some advanced economies do this rebasing almost on yearly basis. And the ideal, according to the UN Statistical Commission, is 5 years. And maybe the last time we did it, that was in 2014, when we used 2010 as a reference year. There was a 20-year gap. So that was why the economy ballooned almost 100%, 89% to be precise. And for this one now, it's a little bit more recent because the last reference year was 2010, and it's less than 10 years after 2010 to 2019. So that's why the economy did not balloon as big, because the changes that would have taken place within 9 years will not be the same with the changes that would have taken place within 20 years. So of course there are changes. The economy, mind you, subsequently AI at the moment might not have been captured that much, or even be not captured at all, but eventually it's going to become more and more important over time. And with subsequent rebasing, it's going to take up a larger chunk of each sector's contribution to GDP.
And let's speak of impact now. For someone running a small business or looking for work, what difference could this rebasing make in their day-to-day life?
Well, as a business owner, as an investor, for example, or a business owner, normally you look at how things are before you decide on how to invest. Normally for indirect investment, you set up shop in a particular entity, or even direct investment, it doesn't have to be foreign. So you're being guided by the data. And with the new data, with the clearer picture, it's just like the megapixel has actually improved. Imagine a phone that came out, an iPhone that maybe iPhone 5 that came out a long time ago, and with the most recent iPhone, maybe iPhone 13 or 14, of course, the resolution of the camera will not be the same. So you have a clearer picture now, and you're totally guided on how to go about your investing. And if you know a particular sector is growing, it means that's a sector to invest in, or that's a sector to start your business in. And if you know a sector is shrinking, that's to tell you that sector is in its twilight, is dwindling, is diminishing in importance. So you know how to apportion resources appropriately so as to make the most profit that you want to make as a business owner or as an investor.
And is there any risk here? I mean, is there a risk that the rebasing poses in terms of covering up challenges like poverty, inflation, unemployment, and the likes?
Oh, of course, the rebased statistic, which is bigger than what it used to be, we're talking about in dollar terms, 243 as compared to 188 before the rebased data came out. It shows the economy has grown by 30%, but it's not really an actual growth. It's just that based on the method we were using before, we did the calculation and we arrived at 188. And now with the new method, with the new methodology, we have a clearer picture and it seems to be bigger. But in terms of poverty, in terms of employment, we know the unemployment has not changed because GDP has been rebased. We know that Nigerians are not richer because GDP has been rebased. So in terms of poverty and employment, nothing has changed, actually. Nothing has changed.
And from an international perspective, how does this affect the way investors or development partners, how does this affect the way they see Nigeria at the moment?
Of course, with a bigger GDP size, in terms of our debt to GDP is going to reduce. Before the rebased figure, we were talking about something in the region of 50%. Half of our
All right, Dr. Ark, do we still have you?
Our debt was half of the GDP. But with this new rebase, so there's a huge improvement. So it's more sustainable. We have more fiscal space, and we have more capacity to borrow. And our lenders will not be too afraid to lend to us. I know that can be abused too, because we may borrow for the wrong reasons. But if we are going to borrow for the right reasons, it means a brighter future for Nigerians, with the possibility of reduction in poverty and unemployment. And even in terms of ranking, I know we're still the fourth. Before the rebased data came out, we were fourth, and after the rebased data, we're still fourth. But you know, size also matters. 188 to 143 or 144. There's a change, and that will show that our weight is bigger than what the numbers were showing before now, and that the global, the international, multilateral organizations, and even international investors will look at us and see, all right, this is actually not the lightweight that we used to think. Is a bit, maybe, if not heavyweight, at least bigger than the lightweight economy.
Right. And speaking of a better future for Nigerians, just as you mentioned, are we expecting this to in any way influence government policies in any real way, perhaps in how resources are allocated or which sectors get more attention now?
Of course, with a clearer picture, you should expect reprioritization. Maybe what the government thought was not as big, something like the crude oil and gas, for example. The importance government maybe used to attach to it in terms of contribution to GDP will not be diminished. And then if you look at the blue economy, it's relatively new. It's going to have more importance now with the rebased data. It's going to guide policy making by different tiers of government, and even for multilateral agencies, the way they approach Nigeria now, being guided by this data instead of the previous one. Of course, their decisions will not be the same because things have actually changed. And like I mentioned, even in terms of our revenue, tax revenue, or revenue generally to GDP, with the bigger GDP size, before we were considered a serious laggard, even compared to our West African peers, we were doing so badly when it comes to revenue to GDP. And when the GDP size is even bigger, it means we have smaller, the revenue to GDP is even smaller. So that would push the government to try
It looks like there's a little bit of a challenge with the network.
more revenue addition, so that we have enough revenue.
Please carry on.
All right. So with bigger GDP, the base has increased, and if the revenue has largely remained the same, right, it means that we have smaller revenue to GDP ratio, and that will even make the government to try to look for ways to generate more revenue, because it shows that we're seriously lagging when it comes to revenue generation. And if more revenue is generated, and by the way, we need more revenue. I know some Nigerians consume, they confuse more revenue with higher tax rates. The government doesn't have to increase tax rates for them to generate more revenue. Like the base GDP has incorporated parts of the Nigerian economy that was considered informal, has been added to the GDP. And the moment it's been added to GDP, it's been formalized bit by bit. And that would be revenue for you to generate revenue from these informal parts of the economy. And also ensure better tax administration and plugging all the loopholes that we might have had, but we're still having in generated revenue. So we can be more effective, more efficient in generating revenue, and by that increasing our revenue instead of increasing the tax rate. And I think that will mean that we're seriously lagging and we need to double our efforts. So that might be good, because the more revenue we have, the better the government is able to pay for healthcare, for education, for infrastructure, and many other things that are critically needed in Nigeria.
Right. And when you were speaking, you mentioned the blue economy, and that brings me to my next question. In your point of view, where really is the real opportunity? If you're to point us, as an economist, where are the real opportunities here? What sectors, what groups have the tendency to benefit the most if we act on this data wisely?
Of course, the blue economy is new, like I mentioned earlier. But you look at digitization. A lot of digitization is taking place, and it's going to become more and more important. Even for telecoms, I know it was just recently incorporated in the last rebasing that was done in 2014, and it's going to become more and more important, by the way. And even for um, real, real estate, Nigeria has serious housing deficit, and that could be a huge opportunity for investors, whether local or foreign, to invest into the real estate sector of the Nigerian economy, because there is a need for housing, particularly for the poor. And other aspects of the economy, such as even the financial aspect, we're talking about fintech in particular, is a sector on the ascendant. So there's a need for more investment into that, because if you look at it, fintech is the future of the financial sector. And if you look at even for Nigerian banks, and that's why they're becoming groups, they're becoming holdings now. And because if they don't do that, if they don't incorporate fintech into their activities, if they don't incorporate digitization into their activity, they will likely go the way of Nokia when smartphones came, or BlackBerry when Android phones and iPhones came. So you have to adapt with new changes. You have to change your behavior, and you have to adapt so that you stay relevant. And for investors, the same way, you don't put your money in a sector that is on its way out, or is becoming is diminishing in size or importance. You look for a sector that is on the ascendant, such as the digital economy, such as the blue economy, and other aspects of the economy that are actually looking up.
And final word of advice before I let you go, if you're to advise us here today to make sure that this isn't just a numbers update, how would you say that the government, all of those involved, make sure that this is not just a numbers update, but something that leads to real improvement in people's life? What would be your advice to us today?
The government can make sure that the base GDP number actually benefits Nigerians, because you have a smaller debt to GDP ratio now. So you have a wiggle room for you to even borrow some more. But the borrowing should be done in such a way that is assigned critical sectors of the economy, like healthcare delivery, like education, talking about human capital now, and also fees.
Looks like we're struggling with the network this morning with Dr. Samson Ark.
Capital.
Okay.
And also in society. And secondly, it also means that to cater for the needs of Nigerians in a way that it will be effectively done to better the lots of Nigerians.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Samson Ark, economist and CEO of Ark Economics and Data Limited. Thank you for your time on The Big Story this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this has been The Big Story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Up next is Social Listen. Do stay with us.